I made this animation that you're seeing right now in about 2 months. This is the first animated short film that I've made, and I'm pretty proud of it. And so today I'd like to show you my process of how I came up with this idea, the structure of the story, the pre-production, the production, the post-production, and just some closing thoughts on this whole experience. My name is Dylan, and this is going to be an analysis video on my animated short film, Uncertain. So, if you couldn't tell already, this video is unscripted, just because I have a lot of thoughts and I kind of just want to get it all out there and not have to worry about writing a script or anything. And also I just thought it might just be a cool idea to have something unscripted like this. So, the story, the idea, how I came up with this project. I've had this idea in my head for a while to make a story centered around gender identity. I'd like to say that I've been thinking about it for like a couple months before starting this project. I just hadn't found the right time to make it up until recently when I did have enough time to make this project, because I thought it's quite a intense subject matter to get into, so I had to be very careful with how I structured my story, but also I wanted it to be serious. I wanted to tackle a serious subject matter and present it in a serious way, because my previous animations that I've done have been slightly light-hearted. If you knew me from my Spamton animation, that was definitely light-hearted. And because I did that animation before, I sort of knew how long this would approximately take, how long a project of this length, around 3 to 4 minutes, would take. So, I felt pretty good. But like I said before, I wanted to make something a bit more serious. And this story is quite personal to me, so I thought, why the hell not? So, the story follows a non-binary person who is assigned male at birth, and right now they're going through a bit of a rough spot, a bit of a low point in their life, where they have sort of cut off from all of their friends and have isolated themselves. You can see that they're staring at their phone and they're looking at old photos of them hanging out with their friends. And then when they go to school, they put on headphones and sort of shut off the world. And actually, one of my inspirations for that one shot of the character putting headphones on their head was from A Silent Voice, where Ishida covers his ears with his hands to sort of block off the noise. I thought that was some cool imagery that I could snatch from. Anyway, continuing with the story, after the character goes through a day at school where they look at different people, and they see that they're presenting either male or female, and that because they want to present as androgynous, they don't really feel like they can fit in. And then also, when they try and use the gender-neutral bathroom, of course, there's some people doing some ungodly things in there, like smoking the booth, hitting the joint, doing the pot, vaping, So they leave and return back home. This is when our character gets ready to go to bed, and they fall asleep, and in their dream they confront their own body. They confront a personification of their own body, and then they have a little heart-to-heart conversation, and eventually our character learns to accept themselves, and they learn that they don't have to have everything figured out right now, and that they can learn about everything in their own pace. And then finally at the end we get a shot of our main character reaching out to their friend on the phone. So I thought it was like a nice little contained story, and would show off some experiences that I don't think are really shown off all that much in the media, especially pertaining to male-born non-binary people, which I feel like is an underrepresented minority of people. And so now talking about the structure of the story, and so me personally, I am not like a big storyteller. What I mean by that is that I haven't got writing talents. I haven't written stories before. I haven't, extensively learned story structure. I'm just a big fan of learning about how to create stories, and I want to create more stories. So what I do know is that, in my approach at least, everything comes from one scene. And so, actually in this case, everything came from one shot. Before everything, I thought of this one shot, this one image of the personification of our character's body, like hunched over and sort of like hunched over and isolated and, in sorrow. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. What can I do from there? Okay, maybe have the real character confront that hunched over body. Okay, so maybe they talk to each other. Alright, but now where do I go from there? They talk to each other. Okay, what leads up to that point? Maybe our character is in this dream, right? That way, nothing has to make sense, and so it would fit in that the character would be confronting themselves. So I used that sort of storytelling structure where I came up with one idea and I built everything around that. So everything in the story is either leading up to or is supported by that one interaction between the soul and the body. Yeah, and I think that's all I have for structure. Also, I wanted to use the rule of threes in a way. And so there are three specific instances that each pertain to that each funnel into the main idea of the character confronting their own gender identity, their own body, their own soul. And so the first instance is when they are looking at other people in the school, and they're like, okay, I'm not like these people, I'm not feminine presenting, I'm not masculine presenting, blah blah blah. The second instance is when they go into the bathroom and they're unable to use the gender neutral bathroom. They feel like they're not using the safe space that's available to them because they're unable to, which feels even more isolating. Okay, that's number two. Number three is when they go back home and they look in the mirror and they have a shower. And it's that small little confrontation of our main character's physical form. You know, you have to get undressed, you have to look at your body, which can bring along feelings of dysphoria. And so with each instance, they all are centered around the same thing. It's all centered around our main character's gender identity. But with each instance, these emotions sort of ramp up again and again. The first instance is it's a bit small, it's a bit subtle, where our character just sort of like puts their hand on their face and like furrows their eyebrows. It's quite subtle. It's quite an internal emotion. Then, once they go to the gender-neutral bathroom, you see that our character is a bit more bothered by the fact that people are using this gender-neutral space not to its purpose. And so our character, you know, feels even more annoyed. You can see their facial expression is more annoyed. Then finally, when they confront their body, when they get undressed to have a shower, if people understand how gender dysphoria feels like, then they will know that this is like the precipice of like feelings. You know, gender dysphoria is very intrusive and it's quite a hard thing to handle. And so it's, you know, it's very strong emotions. So 1, 2, 3, 3 instances all centered around gender identity, and each one of them are becoming more and more intense, all building up to the final scene of our character confronting their own body. And so that was pretty much just a rundown of the structure, how I come up with the structure of the story. Yeah. And so now into pre-production. The first thing I did in pre-production was a little model sheet of our character. I did a little turnaround. I say turnaround, but it's really just like a profile of the character and a head-on of the character, full body. And then I also colored it, and I tried out a couple of different body types, which eventually didn't make the cut. What I wanted to happen was have the body, when the body is hunched over, have the proportions of the body sort of change and look more masculine and more feminine, and sort of like flip between the two. I just didn't have enough time. It would have been cool. Anyway, and so I also kind of wish that I spent a bit more time on this model sheet, maybe going over some different expressions for the character, maybe doing a 3/4 pose as well, because our character in the film does do a couple of 3/4 poses. And so having that in the model sheet would have helped me anchor myself, but you know, it's fine. Then after that, and that took like you know, 2 days to do. It was very quick. And I decided to do the turnaround sheet first because I only really have one character in this short film, and so really understanding that character first before going into the storyboards, I think was a good call. I did the backgrounds shortly after in Clip Studio Paint, and how I did them was first I used the storyboards as a jumping off point, just to get the general perspective down and the camera angle. Then I went in with my pencil and did the lines. Then after that, I used a neutral grey tone, either a light grey, mid grey, or dark grey, depending on the lighting of the shot. Then after that, I did some rough shading, all in grayscale. Then after that, I used a gradient map and some overlay layers, or color layers, to get the general colors down and the general vibe down of each of the shots. And then I just did a bit of cleanup, and yeah, and then the backgrounds were done. So now, after I did that, I did the storyboarding. And so I literally just ripped off from Google Images, default storyboard page or whatever, and it was just like one page with 6 different panels. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this. I screenshotted it, I brought it into Clip Studio Paint, and I just started going. And I actually I went through each panel linearly in the story. I made a list in my notes app of the different scenarios, like what each panel would look like, and I just drew from what I wrote down. Yeah, and so I think in total I drew around 36 panels in total. A couple of them are copied and pasted, because I knew that I would be able to save time on a couple of shots. Some that come to mind are the shot of the character's feet walking out the door. I was able to reuse that with the character's feet walking inside the door. I just flipped it horizontally. And then also with the conversation with the body, I was able to reuse a bunch of the drawings because it was in a over-the-shoulder camera angle, and because they're both the same character, I could, like, there's literally the same model, so I could just reuse the drawings, again, flip horizontally. So after I did the storyboard, and also for the storyboard, it was very rough. I mainly tried to figure out the camera angle for each shot. That's my favorite thing to figure out, is the camera angle, whether it's a high angle, a low angle, if it's at eye level. And then I'd like to say around 1/3 of the panels are just the confrontation between our character and their body. And that's because that was the scene that I wanted to have most focus. I wanted to put the most focus into that scene. And so that's why I used a majority of the panels on that scene. Then after I made all the storyboard pages, I then made a new file and I put them all into a timeline to then figure out the pacing of the whole animation, and also the timing of, how long do I want each shot to hold. Maybe this one is 4 seconds, maybe this one was 2 seconds, blah blah blah. And actually what I found interesting is that as I went into production, I found that I needed each shot to hold just a bit longer than what I planned out in the storyboarding phase. And that's it's quite interesting. I think the reason is because in the storyboarding phase, you're just looking at a picture. It's not moving, it's just an image. And so you get kind of bored at looking at an image for like 3 seconds. So you get a bit bored at looking at an image for like 5 seconds, and so you decide to cut it down to 3 seconds instead. But then when you start animating, you're like, oh man, I only have 3 seconds to work with, but this action takes 5 seconds, so then you move it back to 5 seconds. And so that kind of slowed me down, so in the future I will try and make my storyboards last for a bit longer, yada yada yada. Now into production. what I did was, on the same file, I just made a new layer and turned the opacity down on my storyboard and just went ahead and tried to stick on model. It was kind of hard for me to at the beginning try and draw on model while only working on one layer, but I was able to make it work as time went on. I got more familiar with the character, with the shapes, with their proportions. And then actually, due to time constraints, what I did was I actually skipped the lining phase. Usually my what I would do was I would do a very quick rough, which usually comes on the storyboards. Then I would do a sketch, then I would do the lines, then I would do color and then compositing. But I decided this time to skip out on the lines and just tidy up my sketch, because in recent drawings I've been getting very good at making a very clean sketch from the get-go, and so I thought, why not just do that now? And so that meant that I got to save a lot of time, but that also meant that I had to be very careful with each of my drawings, try not to have too many gaps and too many tails, especially because in the coloring phase I would use the paint bucket tool. And also, using the sketch instead of line work also kind of worked in my favor, because I wanted to have sort of like a rough feeling to it, a bit gritty, so it kind of made the animation feel a bit more real, a bit more naturalistic. And so having the texture of that pencil brush, and also having the drawing not be so clean with lines, I thought was pretty cool. I used a lot of videos of myself for reference. I literally, like, I would say for 90% of the shots, if not 100%, I took a video of myself walking, doing the actions, doing the facial expressions, and then I used those as reference. I didn't trace them. I just held my phone up to my monitor and pressed pause and play on the video and tried to pick out key moments that I could then keyframe and then in between from. And then eventually, as time went on, and of course, this is production. This is like 80-90% of the creative process, of the animation process. This is going to take a long time. I would say this took like a month and a half, just animation. And so, as you can probably assume, I got pretty bored. Of drawing, of sketching, of lining, of everything. And so when I did get bored, what did I do? I colored instead. I also took breaks as well. Taking breaks is, you gotta take breaks. I didn't work every single day. I would say I worked on this for at least 1 hour, 5 out of the 7 days. But sometimes I would go for like a few stretches of time without working on it at all. But yeah, whenever I did get bored of lining, I started coloring, because coloring is easy, and also coloring is cool. When you play an animation pack, it looks cooler with color. It looks more finished. And so now onto post-production. When it comes to compositing, I didn't spend too long on compositing. I took into account, and so at this point in time, when I finished post-production and thinking about when I finished production and thinking about post-production, I was thinking about how much longer I have to finish this, because I have to finish this by the end of March. And so I think I had like about 2 weeks left to do the compositing and the audio. And so I was like, okay, that's a good amount of time. I think I planned this out pretty well. And so I had 2 steps for compositing. The first step was the color grading. Some of the color grading is different for some of the shots. In the bedroom, colors are very dark, they're very muted. I did all the color grading in Clip Studio Paint. And so in the bedroom, the colors are very dark, they're very muted. I used the multiply layer for that. In the staircase, I used some warmer overlay layers. In the school, it's got very bright fluorescent lights. I thought that was a nice contrast to the bedroom. That I used a screen layer. Then in the gender neutral bathroom, I think I used like a green overlay layer to really sell that sort of muddy look to it. And then finally in the dreamscape, I used like a purple overlay layer to really make it feel like otherworldly. Then, after I did that, I moved on to Adobe Premiere Pro. I've used Premiere Pro a couple of times for my animation at least, and I edit all my videos in Adobe Premiere, so I know how audio works in that sense. And so the first thing I did in Premiere was I added this sort of chromatic aberration effect on the sides of the screen, and so it sort of makes the animation look like it was filmed from a physical camera. Again, adding to that realism, that naturalism, that sort of grittiness. And I just thought it was a pretty cool effect. I thought about adding that effect like really early in the process. I was like, oh, this is gonna look so cool once I add the chromatic aberration. And then after I did that, it was onto audio. I thought audio would take a really long time, but I actually went through it a lot quicker than I thought I would. I used my phone to just record a bunch of Foley. Some stuff that I did was walking along my floorboards, and recording a ceiling fan, and then that recording of the ceiling fan I would then reuse in the dreamscape, where I would use a bunch of audio effects, like a distort effect, and I would put it in slow motion. And then I would also use it for background noise as well, because you would always have just a little bit of white noise in a video. At least that's how you would make it real looking, real sounding. It's like whenever you put on a YouTube video, there's always a little bit of background music, because you need a little bit of that background noise. Otherwise, it's just going to feel eerie. It's just going to be dialogue without any background noise. It's gonna be a bit weird. And then finally, I had to record the dialogue as well. I say dialogue, but all I did was I said the lines, and I said the lines into my pillow, and I recorded it with my phone. And so that's how you get that sort of like muffled sound to the voices. And then after I did all that, I just, figured out the levels, and it was all good. And then I also added the subtitles as well. Yeah. And so, some closing thoughts. I had a really good time making this animation. Again, this is my first short film, and for my first short film, I think I did pretty well. And considering that this project was done in a short time span, I started it. I actually can't remember when I started it. I think I started it. Was it January, February, March? I think I started it like beginning of February. And the deadline was end of March, so about 2 months. Yeah, and considering the short time span, I did a lot. I got a lot done. If I did have more time, if I had more time, more than 2 months, I would have liked to do more in-betweens, because right now, the frame rate fluctuates between 3s and 6s. And of course, standard TV animation is on 2s, and Japanese animation is usually on 3s or 4s or something. And so I would have liked to have a bit more in-betweens, but of course that's a lot of work to go through. And considering the deadline that I had, my motto is that it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be good enough. All the animation needs to do, the animation's job, is to sell the action. If you can understand what's going on, that means the animation reads well. And I think all of the shots that I did read well. And then also, like I said before, I wish I did a bit more pre-production, whether that be the turnaround, focus a bit more on the turnaround, or focus a bit more on the expressions as well. I also would have liked to done a color script as well. I really like color scripts, and I think that if I did do a color script, then each shot or each scene would have looked even more visually distinct. And then also I would have liked to have done a bit more shading as well. If I did have more time, I think a bit of shading would have looked nice, at least on a couple of scenes. Some that come to mind is the character staring at their phone screen. I think having a bright phone light on their face would look cool. And then also in the gender neutral bathroom, I think like a key light from like maybe one of the windows above would have looked cool. But yeah, and then also I think I would have liked to have someone recorded music for me as well, whether that be a friend or someone online, or even just licensed a bit of music. But I didn't want to deal with all that, and so I went without music. But I feel like if I did have music, it would have made the ambience just a bit more, made it a bit more moody. But anyway, in all, I am quite proud of what I did, and yeah, I think it's pretty good. Not to toot my own horn. So yeah, that was just a quick rundown of my process for this film. I hope you enjoyed me rambling on about this. yeah, if you'd like to see more animations and illustrations, you can go look at my other videos, or you could subscribe to me. Yeah, and I'll be coming out with more illustrations and animations soon. So, thank you. Goodbye.